The day began like any other for Donald Trump, the larger-than-life figure who had spent years commanding attention on the world stage. Known for his bold demeanor and unfiltered remarks, he was no stranger to making headlines wherever he went. This time, however, he found himself stepping into a realm steeped in centuries of tradition. Buckingham Palace, the heart of British royalty. It wasn't just any visit. It was an official state occasion, complete with all the pomp and circumstance one would expect from such an event. As Trump walked through the grand halls of the palace, surrounded by aides, security personnel, and journalists eager to capture, every moment there was an undeniable buzz in the air. The former U.S. president moved with purpose, his signature confidence radiating as if he still held the reins of power. His suit was immaculate, his tie perfectly knotted, and his posture exuded authority. To anyone watching, it seemed clear that Donald Trump believed this setting was yet another stage designed for him to shine. But Buckingham Palace wasn't just any venue. It was a place where history whispered through its marble floors and gilded ceilings. Portraits of kings and queens lined the walls, their eyes seeming to follow visitors as they passed. The very atmosphere carried a weight that few outsiders could fully grasp. For those born into or serving within the royal institution, it represented duty, loyalty, and an unshakable commitment to protocol. And while Trump may have been familiar with power, he was about to encounter a different kind of authority, one rooted not in charisma but in centuries-old customs. Trump's entourage navigated the sprawling palace under the watchful gaze of royal guards stationed throughout the corridors. These men, dressed in striking red coats and towering bearskin hats, stood motionless, their expressions unreadable. They were symbols of discipline, trained to uphold the dignity of the monarchy without question. Their presence alone commanded respect, even from seasoned politicians and global leaders. Yet Trump appeared unfazed. If anything, he seemed emboldened by the spectacle around him, perhaps even invigorated by the challenge of asserting himself in unfamiliar territory. It didn't take long for the moment to arrive, a small yet pivotal interaction that would soon ripple far beyond the confines of the palace. As Trump approached a group of these stoic guards standing at attention, his stride slowed slightly. He paused, taking in the sight of them, their polished boots, their gleaming buttons, their unwavering focus. In that brief pause, something shifted. Perhaps it was curiosity, or maybe it was simply the instinctive need to test boundaries. Whatever the reason, Trump decided to make his move. With a mix of bravado and nonchalance, he raised a hand toward one of the guards and issued a direct command, "Salute me." His voice cut through the quiet hum of the room, drawing immediate attention from nearby guests and staff. There was no hesitation in his tone, no uncertainty. To Trump, this request likely felt natural. After all, during his time in office, he had grown accustomed to receiving salutes from military personnel back home. Why should this be any different? What happened next, however, caught everyone off guard, including Trump himself. Instead of complying with the order, the guard remained perfectly still, his gaze fixed straight ahead. For a fleeting second, the room seemed to hold its breath. Then, in a calm and measured voice, the guard responded, "Sir, I serve Her Majesty, the Queen. I take orders only from those appointed within the chain of command here." The words landed like a stone dropped into still water, sending ripples of tension across the room. Trump blinked, momentarily caught off guard. The ease with which he usually dominated situations faltered, replaced by a flicker of surprise. He hadn't expected resistance, not here, not now. Around him, people exchanged glances, some suppressing smirks, others unsure whether to intervene. The clash between Trump's brash American style and the rigid formality of British tradition had reached its peak, and it was unfolding right before their eyes. For the guard, this exchange was neither personal nor confrontational. It was simply a matter of duty. Every movement, every word, every decision he made was guided by the principles instilled in him through years of training. He understood that his role went beyond mere symbolism. It was about upholding the values of an institution, older than any single individual. Even someone as prominent as Donald Trump couldn't override centuries of established protocol. Not today. Not ever. Yet, for Trump, the moment must have felt surreal. Here he was, a man who had once led the most powerful nation on earth, reduced to silence by a lone soldier whose allegiance lay elsewhere. It was a stark reminder that not all forms of power are interchangeable, nor do they always translate across borders. While Trump might have seen himself as deserving of universal deference, the guard saw only a visitor, one bound by the same rules as everyone else. As the seconds ticked by, Trump recovered quickly, brushing off the incident with a dismissive gesture. But the seeds of intrigue had already been planted. Those who witnessed the exchange knew they had seen something rare, a collision of worlds, personalities, and ideologies. Little did they realize, though, that this brief moment would spark conversations far beyond the palace walls, turning a simple act of defiance into a story worth telling again and again. The room, which had been buzzing with quiet chatter and the soft clinking of glasses just moments before, suddenly fell into an eerie stillness. All eyes turned toward Donald Trump and the Royal Guard, who now stood locked in a silent standoff. The tension was palpable, like the calm before a storm, as everyone waited to see what would happen next. For Trump, this kind of attention was nothing new. He had spent years commanding rooms, dominating conversations, and steering events to fit his narrative. But here, in the gilded halls of Buckingham Palace, something felt different. This wasn't Washington, D.C. or Mar-a-Lago. It was a place where tradition reigned supreme, and the rules were written long before he entered the scene. The guard's response had been firm, but respectful, delivered without a hint of arrogance or defiance. "Sir, I serve Her Majesty, the Queen. I take orders only from those appointed within the chain of command here." His voice carried no malice, only clarity. It was a simple statement, yet its implications were profound. In that moment, the guard wasn't just addressing Trump. He was speaking for an entire institution, one that valued duty above ego. To him, saluting someone outside the prescribed protocol wasn't merely a breach of etiquette, it was unthinkable. And so when he refused to comply with Trump's demand, it wasn't out of disrespect but out of loyalty to the principles he had sworn to uphold. Trump froze for a fraction of a second, his expression flickering between surprise and disbelief. He wasn't used to being told no, especially not in such a public setting. Throughout his career, whether in business or politics, he had cultivated an image of invincibility, an aura that suggested he could bend situations to his will. People often scrambled to accommodate him, eager to avoid confrontation or earn his favor. But this time, things were different. The guard didn't flinch, didn't waver, didn't even blink. His composure was unshakable, a testament to years of training and discipline. For a man like Trump, whose confidence often bordered on bravado, the guard's refusal must have felt jarring. Here was someone who couldn't be swayed by charm, intimidated by status, or impressed by wealth. The guard's unwavering stance served as a reminder that not all forms of authority are equal, and certainly not interchangeable. While Trump might have seen himself as deserving of universal recognition, the guard viewed him simply as a guest, a visitor bound by the same protocols as anyone else. As the silence stretched on, Trump quickly recovered, masking his initial shock with characteristic nonchalance. With a dismissive wave of his hand, he muttered something under his breath about sticking to protocol, though his tone betrayed a hint of irritation. Whether he truly understood the significance of the moment or simply chose to downplay it remained unclear. What was clear, however, was that the exchange had left an impression, not just on Trump but on everyone present. Guests nearby exchanged nervous glances, unsure how to react. Some stifled laughter behind their hands, while others leaned closer to whisper theories about what had just transpired. A few diplomats shifted uncomfortably, wondering if the incident might strain diplomatic relations, though most suspected it wouldn't. Journalists scribbled furiously in their notebooks, already envisioning headlines: "Trump orders guard to salute him, only to be rebuffed." It was the kind of story that practically wrote itself, dramatic, unexpected, and ripe with symbolism. Meanwhile, the guard returned to his original position, resuming his stoic stance as if nothing unusual had occurred. To him, this was just another day at work, another test of his resolve. If anything, the encounter reinforced why he took pride in his role. Serving as a royal guard wasn't about seeking recognition or basking in glory. It was about embodying the values of an institution larger than oneself. Every movement, every word, every decision was guided by centuries of tradition. Breaking protocol, even for someone as high profile as Donald Trump, was simply not an option. Yet, despite his outward calm, one couldn't help but wonder what thoughts ran through the guard's mind during those tense moments. Did he feel pressure knowing that all eyes were on him? Was he aware of the weight of his actions, both symbolic and literal? Or did he simply trust in the training that had prepared him for precisely this kind of situation? Whatever the case, his composure never faltered. He stood tall, steady, and unyielding, a living embodiment of the principles he represented. As the evening wore on, the incident became a topic of conversation among guests. Over hors d'oeuvres and champagne flutes, people debated its meaning and speculated about its aftermath. Some admired the guard's poise, calling him a hero for standing up to one of the most polarizing figures of modern times. Others saw humor in the situation, finding irony in the fact that Trump, a man known for bending rules, had met his match in a soldier bound by them. Still, others wondered how Trump himself would process the event. Would he laugh it off as a harmless misunderstanding? Or would he harbor resentment over being denied something he believed he deserved? Despite the varying opinions, one thing was certain. The interaction between Trump and the guard highlighted a fundamental difference in worldview. For Trump, success was measured by influence, charisma, and the ability to command attention. For the guard, it was defined by duty, discipline, and adherence to principle. These two philosophies collided briefly but memorably, leaving an indelible mark on everyone who witnessed it. Later that night, as Trump sat down to dinner alongside members of the royal family, the memory of the encounter lingered in the air. Though he appeared unfazed on the surface, insiders later revealed that he had privately expressed annoyance over the guard's refusal to salute him. To Trump, it may have seemed like a minor inconvenience, a hiccup in an otherwise prestigious event. But to those who understood the deeper significance of the moment, it was more than that. It was a lesson in humility, a reminder that even the most powerful individuals are subject to boundaries they cannot control. And so, as the evening drew to a close and guests began filing out of the palace, the story of the former president and the steadfast guard continued to spread. It was a tale of contrasts, of personalities colliding in unexpected ways. More importantly, it was a testament to the enduring power of tradition, a force that, unlike fleeting fame or political influence, stands the test of time. The incident at Buckingham Palace didn't end with the tense exchange between Donald Trump and the Royal Guard. It only began there. As the evening unfolded, the atmosphere shifted subtly but noticeably. Trump, ever the showman, seemed determined to move past the awkward moment, laughing loudly at jokes during dinner and engaging enthusiastically in conversations with members of the royal family. Yet, those who knew him well could sense a flicker of irritation beneath his polished exterior. He wasn't used to being denied anything, let alone something as seemingly straightforward as a salute. To him, this was more than just protocol. It was a challenge to his authority, a reminder that not everyone bowed to his will. For the royal family and their staff, however, the encounter was business as usual. The British monarchy had long been a bastion of tradition, where every gesture, word, and action carried meaning. Protocol wasn't merely a set of guidelines, it was the lifeblood of an institution that had endured for centuries. Breaking it wasn't an option, not even for someone as influential as a former U.S. president. This cultural divide, the clash between Trump's brash, self-assured style and Britain's deeply ingrained respect for hierarchy, was impossible to ignore. And while Trump might have viewed the refusal as personal, the truth was far simpler. The guard wasn't rejecting him as an individual. He was upholding a system much older and more complex than either of them. As the formal dinner progressed, Whispers about the earlier incident began to circulate among guests. Some leaned in conspiratorially, recounting what they had witnessed, while others speculated about how Trump would handle the situation moving forward. The room buzzed with quiet energy, a mixture of curiosity and amusement. For many Britons, the story was almost poetic, a testament to the resilience of tradition in the face of modern bravado. After all, here was a man known for bending rules and rewriting norms, yet even he couldn't override centuries of established practice. It was a rare moment when the immovable object met the unstoppable force, and neither side backed down. Trump, for his part, appeared to brush off the incident publicly, though insiders later revealed that he had privately expressed frustration. He didn't get it, one aide reportedly said, referring to Trump's inability or unwillingness to grasp the significance of the guard's actions. To Trump, the refusal may have felt like a slight, a failure to acknowledge his status as a global leader. But to the British, it wasn't about him at all. It was about preserving the integrity of an institution that transcended personalities and politics. The monarchy wasn't built on charisma or persuasion. It was rooted in duty, history, and unwavering commitment to principle. This cultural disconnect became even clearer as the night wore on. During speeches and toasts, references to tradition and shared values dominated the conversation. Guests spoke of alliances forged over decades, of mutual respect between nations, and of the importance of honoring customs that united people across generations. Trump listened politely, nodding along as expected, but there was a subtle tension in his demeanor, a hint that he found these ideals somewhat abstract compared to the tangible, transactional nature of his own worldview. Where others saw symbolism, Trump often sought results. Where others valued continuity, he prized disruption. These differences weren't inherently good or bad. They were simply reflective of two distinct approaches to leadership. By the time dessert was served, the topic of the guard's refusal had spread beyond the palace walls. Reporters stationed outside caught wind of the story, piecing together fragments from anonymous sources and eyewitness accounts. Within hours, social media platforms lit up with reactions. Supporters of Trump rushed to defend him, arguing that the guard should have shown respect to a former world leader. Critics, meanwhile, found humor in the situation, pointing out that Trump's demand for a salute revealed a fundamental misunderstanding of British protocol. Memes and jokes flooded timelines, turning the incident into both a cautionary tale and a source of entertainment. Back inside the palace, the guard himself remained unfazed by the growing attention. To him, the encounter was just another day at work, a test of his ability to uphold the standards of his position. He hadn't acted out of spite or arrogance. He had simply followed the rules laid out for him. In fact, the guard likely viewed his response as a matter of pride. Serving in the Royal Guard wasn't just a job, it was a calling, a chance to represent an institution larger than oneself. Every movement, every decision, every interaction was guided by a code of conduct designed to protect the dignity of the monarchy. Breaking that code, even for someone as prominent as Trump, would have undermined everything the Guard stood for. As the evening drew to a close, palace officials addressed the incident with characteristic restraint. When asked about it later, they issued a brief statement. The Royal Guards are bound by duty to follow specific protocols, no exceptions. There was no elaboration, no attempt to sensationalize the moment. To them, the explanation was sufficient. The rules were clear, and they applied to everyone equally, regardless of title or stature. For Trump, the experience must have been a humbling one, though he would never admit it publicly. Used to operating in environments where his presence commanded immediate deference, he had encountered a system that operated differently. In America, power often came with flexibility. Leaders could bend rules or rewrite them altogether if they deemed it necessary. In Britain, however, power was tempered by tradition. Even the most influential figures were subject to boundaries they couldn't control. For someone like Trump, whose identity was closely tied to his ability to dominate situations, this realization may have been difficult to accept. Yet, despite the initial awkwardness, the incident offered a valuable lesson, not just for Trump, but for anyone watching. It underscored the importance of respecting institutions, even when they operate differently from what we're accustomed to. It reminded us that true strength lies not in imposing our will, but in understanding and appreciating the perspectives of others. And perhaps most importantly, it highlighted the enduring appeal of steadfastness in a world increasingly defined by chaos and change. As guests departed Buckingham Palace that night, the memory of the encounter lingered in the air. For some, it was a humorous anecdote to share with friends. For others, it was a poignant reminder of the delicate balance between power and protocol. And for the Guard, it was simply another chapter in a career dedicated to service. Whatever the interpretation, one thing was certain. The story of Donald Trump and the Royal Guard would be told and retold, a testament to the timeless dance between tradition and personality. By the time Donald Trump returned to the United States, the story of his encounter with the Royal Guard had already taken on a life of its own. News outlets across the globe were buzzing with reports of the incident, dissecting every detail and analyzing its implications. Social media platforms were ablaze with memes, jokes, and heated debates, turning what might have been a fleeting moment into a cultural phenomenon. For Trump's supporters, the narrative was one of disrespect, a claim that the Guard should have shown deference to a former world leader. For his critics, it was an opportunity to highlight the absurdity of Trump's demand, pointing out that even in a foreign land steeped in tradition, he couldn't resist asserting dominance. The divide in public opinion mirrored the broader polarization that defined much of his presidency. Back home, Trump seemed to adopt a dismissive stance toward the entire episode, at least outwardly. During interviews and public appearances, he brushed off questions about the incident, often deflecting with humor or vague remarks. They're sticklers for the rules over there," he quipped during one press conference, flashing his trademark grin. "Very proper, very stiff upper lip. You know how they are." His tone suggested that he viewed the situation as trivial, almost beneath him. Yet insiders close to Trump whispered otherwise. According to aides, the former president harbored lingering annoyance over the Guard's refusal. To him, it wasn't just about a salute. It was about what the refusal represented, a challenge to his authority, a rejection of the respect he believed he deserved. For a man who thrived on admiration and control, this was no small matter. Meanwhile, in Britain, the Guard at the center of the controversy became something of a folk hero. Dubbed the unyielding sentinel by some tabloids, he was celebrated for his unwavering commitment to duty. Stories emerged about his background, how he had trained rigorously for years to earn his place among the elite ranks of the Royal Guard, how he had memorized countless protocols and rehearsed movements until they became second nature. Ordinary citizens took pride in his actions, seeing them as a reflection of British values, discipline, loyalty, and an unshakable adherence to principle. Some even called for him to be formally recognized, though palace officials maintained their usual discretion, refusing to comment further on the matter. As days turned into weeks, the incident continued to ripple through both countries, sparking conversations about leadership, tradition, and the nature of power itself. In America, talk shows and podcasts debated whether Trump's request had been reasonable or arrogant. Supporters argued that a salute was a simple gesture of courtesy, especially given Trump's status as a former commander-in-chief. Critics countered that demanding such a gesture in a foreign country demonstrated a lack of understanding and perhaps even entitlement. He can't walk into Buckingham Palace and expect everyone to drop what they're doing because he says, "So," one commentator remarked. That's not how the world works. In Britain, the discussion took on a slightly different tone. While Americans grappled with questions of ego and protocol, Britons focused more on the symbolism of the moment. For many, the Guard's response was a powerful reminder of why institutions like the monarchy mattered. In an era of rapid change and uncertainty, traditions provided stability and continuity. They offered a framework for navigating complex situations, ensuring that decisions weren't made impulsively but were instead guided by deeply ingrained principles. The Guard's refusal to bend wasn't seen as stubbornness, it was seen as strength, an example of what happened when individuals prioritized duty over personal gain. The contrast between Trump's approach and the Guard's demeanor, also highlighted a fundamental difference in leadership styles. Trump's brand of leadership was bold, brash, and often improvisational. He prided himself on breaking norms and rewriting rules, viewing flexibility as a sign of strength. The Guard, on the other hand, embodied a more restrained form of leadership, one rooted in consistency, discipline, and selflessness. Both approaches had their merits, but they represented opposite ends of the spectrum. Where Trump sought to dominate, the Guard sought to serve. Where Trump valued visibility, the Guard valued anonymity. These differences weren't just philosophical. They were practical, shaping how each man interacted with the world around him. As the story gained traction, it also sparked interest beyond political circles. Educators began using the incident as a case study in classrooms, encouraging students to think critically about power dynamics and cultural expectations. Writers penned essays exploring the symbolic weight of a salute, what it meant to give one, and what it meant to withhold it. Artists created paintings and sketches depicting the standoff, capturing the tension in vivid detail. Even late night, comedians got in on the act, crafting skits that poked fun at Trump's demand while celebrating the Guard's steadfastness. The incident had transcended its origins, becoming a lens through which people examined larger themes of authority, humility, and mutual respect. For Trump, the aftermath of the event served as a reminder of how differently he was perceived abroad, compared to at home. In the United States, he remained a polarizing figure, beloved by some and reviled by others. Abroad, however, his reputation was often shaped by moments like this, instances where his brashness clashed with local customs or sensibilities. While some foreign leaders admired his directness, others found it jarring, even offensive. The encounter at Buckingham Palace underscored this dynamic, illustrating how Trump's style could sometimes alienate rather than inspire. Despite the backlash, or perhaps because of it, the incident ultimately reinforced Trump's image as a disruptor. Love him or hate him, he had a knack for pushing boundaries and forcing people to confront uncomfortable truths. Whether intentional or not, his demand for a salute exposed fault lines in how we view power and tradition, prompting discussions that might otherwise have remained dormant. And while he may not have intended to spark such a debate, the fact that he did spoke volumes about his ability to command attention, even when the spotlight wasn't entirely flattering. For the Guard, the experience likely passed without much fanfare. To him, the interaction was simply part of his job, a test of his resolve that he met with quiet dignity. Yet, for those who admired him, it was proof that true strength lies not in imposing your will, but in standing firm when tested. As the weeks went by and the headlines faded, the memory of the incident lingered, not as a scandal or a controversy, but as a testament to the enduring power of principle. It was a story about two men, two worlds, and the timeless dance between tradition and personality. And though their paths would never cross again, the moment they shared left an indelible mark on history. The story of Donald Trump and the Royal Guard didn't fade away quietly. Instead, it lingered in public consciousness, evolving into something far greater than a single awkward moment at Buckingham Palace. Over time, the incident became a symbol, a lesson wrapped in spectacle, encapsulating broader truths about leadership, tradition, and the human condition. It wasn't just about a man who demanded a salute. It was about what that demand revealed: the tension between authority and protocol, ego and humility, individuality and collective values. In the months that followed, the narrative took on new dimensions as people reflected on its implications. For some, it served as a cautionary tale about the dangers of unchecked confidence. Trump's insistence on being saluted, despite knowing little about British customs, highlighted how easily one could overstep boundaries when blinded by self-assurance. To his critics, this was classic Trump, bold to a fault, unbothered by nuance and quick to impose his will without considering context. Yet for others, it underscored an admirable trait: his refusal to conform to expectations. Whether or not they agreed with him, few could deny that Trump operated according to his own rules, even if those rules sometimes clashed with reality. On the other hand, The guard's response offered its own set of lessons. His unwavering adherence to protocol demonstrated the power of discipline, not as a rigid constraint but as a guiding principle. In a world where flexibility is often celebrated, the guard reminded us that there are times when standing firm is more valuable than adapting. He wasn't acting out of pride or defiance. He was fulfilling his duty, embodying the ideals of an institution that had endured for centuries. His actions spoke to the importance of staying true to one's values, even when faced with pressure, from someone as influential as Trump or from the weight of public opinion. As the story continued to circulate, it sparked deeper conversations about the nature of power itself. What does it mean to lead? Is it about commanding respect through force or earning it through consistency and integrity? These questions resonated across cultures, professions, and generations. Leaders in various fields began drawing parallels between the incident and their own experiences. Business executives debated whether innovation required breaking rules or upholding standards. Military officers discussed the balance between obedience and initiative. Teachers used the story to illustrate the concept of accountability, showing students that even the most powerful figures are subject to limits. The encounter at Buckingham Palace had become more than just a headline. It was a lens through which people examined their own beliefs and behaviors. For Britain, the incident reinforced national pride in its traditions. The monarchy, often criticized for being outdated or irrelevant, found renewed appreciation among citizens who saw it as a bulwark against chaos. The Guard's steadfastness became emblematic of what many admired about their country: resilience, decorum, and a commitment to order. Even those who weren't staunch monarchists couldn't help but feel a sense of admiration for the way the situation unfolded. Here was proof that institutions built on principles could withstand challenges, even from larger-than-life personalities like Trump. The episode served as a reminder that while individuals come and go, systems endure. Across the Atlantic, Americans viewed the story through a different lens. For Trump's supporters, it was yet another example of how the rest of the world failed to appreciate his greatness. They argued that the Guard's refusal was petty and disrespectful, dismissing it as evidence of Britain's stuffy elitism. Critics, however, saw it as a much-needed reality check, a moment when Trump's outsized ego collided with the hard edges of institutional norms. To them, the incident illustrated why checks and balances mattered, both domestically and internationally. No matter how charismatic or confident a leader might be, there were always boundaries they couldn't cross and shouldn't try to. Trump himself never publicly revisited the incident in detail, though it occasionally surfaced in interviews or speeches. When asked about it, he typically downplayed its significance, framing it as a minor hiccup in an otherwise successful visit. "It's all good," he would say with a shrug, brushing off any suggestion that the moment had bothered him. But those close to him knew better. Trump's ego was famously fragile, and the refusal must have stung, however briefly. It wasn't so much the act itself that irked him, but the underlying message that not everyone recognized his authority or cared to acknowledge it. For a man accustomed to bending situations to his will, this realization likely rankled, even if he chose not to dwell on it publicly. Meanwhile, the Guard returned to his duties, unfazed by the attention. To him, the encounter was just another test of his resolve, no different from the countless drills and inspections he had endured during training. Yet outside the palace walls, his quiet heroism inspired countless admirers. People wrote letters, praising his composure, shared stories of their own encounters with authority, and expressed gratitude for his reminder that standing up for principles often requires courage. Though he never sought recognition, the Guard became a symbol of quiet strength, a figure who proved that true leadership isn't about seeking glory, but serving something greater than oneself. Ultimately, the story transcended its participants, becoming a reflection of universal themes. It was about the clash of personalities, yes, but also about the delicate balance between innovation and tradition, charisma and discipline, individual ambition, and collective responsibility. It showed that even in moments of conflict there is room for understanding and growth. Both Trump and the Guard represented extremes, yet together, they painted a fuller picture of what it means to wield influence responsibly. Years later, when historians looked back on the incident, they saw it not as a scandal or a blunder, but as a teachable moment. It reminded future generations that power comes in many forms, and that the most enduring kind isn't the kind that demands submission, but the kind that earns respect. The guards' refusal to salute Trump wasn't an act of defiance. It was an affirmation of purpose. And Trump's insistence on making the request wasn't a failure of judgment. It was a testament to his unrelenting drive. Together, they created a moment that transcended politics, offering insights into human nature itself. In the end, the story of Donald Trump and the Royal Guard wasn't about who won or lost. It was about the interplay between two worlds. One, defined by boldness and disruption, the other by tradition and restraint. It was about the lessons we can learn from each other, even in moments of disagreement. And perhaps most importantly, it was about the enduring appeal of steadfastness. In a chaotic era, a reminder that no matter how loud the voices around us may grow, some principles remain worth protecting.